that?
He's ready.
Awesome.
All right.
We have to
cool.
sign releases if you're going to film us. I'm just kidding.
We had somebody sit out once.
I'm just kidding.
All right, so I think Brian's put us live, so I want to welcome everybody to the Webster Public Library and our great Diverse Abilities Dialogues presentations. This is, I don't know, our fifth one, something like that. And they've been very successful. We've been recording these and people have been watching them online. It's been wonderful. I'm Jenny Paxson. I am the Adult Services Librarian here at the Webster Public Library. I do our Reader's Discovery and our Tech Help, but I'm also very passionate about people with developmental disabilities, since I have two children who have developmental disabilities. My son is 9 and has autism, and my daughter is 7 and she has Down syndrome, autism, and ADHD. So knowing that I could, had trouble finding services and help for my daughter and my son, I wanted to be able to help others. So we've had a great partnership with Parents Helping Parents Coalition of Monroe County and with the Challenger Miracle Field of Greater Rochester. And we've been very lucky to do these presentations for the community. And I will pass the mic along to Beth, who is from Challenger, and she's just going to say a little bit about her organization.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Beth Unico. I'm the director for Challenger Miracle Field of Greater Rochester, as Jenny said. We have athletic programming, social engagements for people of all ages, all abilities. We're based out of Webster. We've got a really wonderful, dedicated, fully accessible field. We're really trying to grow, but I always tell everybody we're about so much more than sports. We are that place where parents and caregivers can come together and learn about all these resources, kind of like what we're doing today. And that's the magic of our field and our organization. Because I was that parent, like similar to Jenny, I was lost and looking for services for my child. And we are so lucky to live in such a wonderfully rich in resources area for kids with special needs. And so I am so happy and so thankful to you for coming here and your time and your information that you're going to give us, because it just helps everyone, and very thankful to be working with Jenny, Danielle, Kim, and Brett. So I will pass to Parents Helping Parents. Which one's going up? Britt?
You're dressed nicer.
I didn't know if I had to push the button. My name is Brittany Jensick. I am a mother to 21 children. 14 of my children have intellectual and developmental and medical disabilities. I am also the president of Parents Helping Parents Coalition of Monroe County, which is an advocacy organization aimed at supporting families with children with developmental disabilities, with delays, with concerns, seeking evals, receiving diagnoses, trying to put supports in place that will make a difference for them. I am lucky enough that our family did receive a lot of the supports that are difficult to get right now. But we really are in a resource-rich community. So the goal of our organization is to kind of build, collaborate with other organizations in the area and kind of build a safety net so that families are not falling through the cracks. We collaborate with Challenger Miracle Field, with Webster Library to put on this presentation. We do it monthly. As Jenny said, we've had 5 or 6. We're hoping to just keep it going. So we're glad you're here. We're glad you guys are here today. And feel free to watch.
Feel free to come to our play date next Saturday.
We do. We have a play date that we host. Every other month we host a play date for the community. It's free. Everybody's welcome. It doesn't matter the age. It doesn't matter what's going on. Next week is at the Toy Library from 12 to 2 on Saturday. The opposite month, we do a webinar that's some educational webinar that the community tells us that they have an interest in. Sometimes it's language development, feeding, concerns, all sorts of different webinars, but we alternate every other month. So next week is our Toy Library Playdate, and we'd love to see you there.
So I'm going to start with our first question for the panel here. I'd like you to introduce yourselves and then tell us how you got started in the field that you're in and what you do, what your services are.
Sure.
That's great.
That's a
Where do we
lot,
start?
to pull into. So I'm Ken Shamley, and I'm a psychologist at UMC Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics. I currently primarily function as the director for our behavioral health services within developmental and behavioral pediatrics. I started into the field like 25 years ago. I spent a good 4 years really working in classrooms in a special day treatment kind of school, and originally really was focused on kids that were kind of like identified with emotional behavioral disabilities, and then we started to receive a more complex population, and I fell in love with developmental disabilities and working with kids there. And then that just continued to grow, and I started to do that in different ways. And so this is probably, I don't know, the fourth or fifth state I've lived in since I started that journey. But I'm happy to be in Rochester. I think in terms of, a lot of the work for outpatient behavioral health services and developmental behavioral pediatrics, there are things that we've focused on that obviously did feel like they needed maybe an additional kind of like specialty care, some additional kind of specialty knowledge experience, and things that seemed like there was interest, again, from the community at different points of time. And so we have quite a few different programs, and I'm going to embarrass myself, and I'm not sure if I'll remember all of them, but we do have a toileting program we have two programs that are focused on using OPWDD FSS funding. So we have like our program that does in-home help for families that is really kind of like, I kind of think of it as kind of like some additional coaching and some direct work with families and kids in the home. They're experiencing some challenging behavior. In addition to that, we also have another OPWDD program for toileting, but it also does accept those who just want to use insurance. We have one for just general behavioral challenges in clinic. We have a feeding program. We have a program called Help Is in Your Hands for like focusing on parents who are newly receiving a diagnosis of autism for their child, and they're interested in getting some direct coaching from one of our psychologists to actually like learn how to pull out some of the social interactions and things that you're looking for to have with your child. So that focuses on really young kids. And I want to say that we do have like also some newer services, like some counseling services for, trauma and grief for individuals with disabilities as well. And we do have, obviously, our Families Moving Forward program, which is really more of our FASD programs. So fetal alcohol syndrome kind of programs as well. Oh, and yes, access usually through sleep medicine. We do have some specific services, for sleep issues that are commonly experienced for individuals with developmental disabilities, so chronic insomnia, just general issues that come up that make it hard, just like it would be for any child, to sometimes kind of go along with the schedule and getting to bed. Helping do some desensitization for sleep studies that have to happen. So, there are some available things like that, and also if they are prescribed something for sleep apnea, which usually means they might need some help getting compliant or kind of cooperative with wearing some of that gear. So we do those kinds of things as well. I think those are like our major programs, that we currently have. But my job right now is primarily making sure all this runs smoothly, and and also figuring out what else do we need. What else would it be helpful for us to lend some of our collective expertise to, in a way that we know that we're not the panacea and everything for the community, but at the same time we could serve perhaps a specific function and help even those in the community as they continue to provide other kinds of services for folks. And so that's what I spend my time doing.
And also, just because Dr. Schilling won't say this, he also consults regularly with some of our children that may end up in the hospital in the emergency or the CPAP. And Dr. Shamlian tries to make sure that their needs are met for individuals with developmental disabilities that end up in CPEP, and you consult with the teams over there to make sure their needs are adequately addressed as much as possible with the team
Yes.
that is over there.
Yeah, so I do whatever I can. but-
Yes. He's always,
It
you know,
goes around.
looking for, you know, the needs of our kids are different. So,
Yeah, I would say like my passion is that I think our, you know, one of the greatest compliments I can usually get from families is that when they come into our clinic or they meet some of our clinicians is that they feel like I don't have to worry about my child, like they actually already accept exactly what's going on in my situation. There's no extra questions. They're not scared of my child. You know, they're just like, this is just like any other kid. And hopefully they feel that.
Yeah.
And I happen to believe that, you know, at least within our system, you know, developmental peds is kind of like where they belong. And so we're trying to make sure that there's a breadth of services that can answer or help with as many things as possible within our own ranks, so to speak. Yeah.
hi, so I'm Lisa Latin, and first and foremost, I'm a parent of a young man who's now just 20, who has intellectual and developmental disabilities. So I just wanted to ask, a show of hands, how many of you love someone with an intellectual or developmental disability that's in the audience? Love that, good. So I am coming up on almost 10 years with the division. I started out as a volunteer, and one of the first people I met when I started, when we were over at the hospital, remember the silver elevators? How many of you are old enough to remember the silver elevators up to the 6th floor? One of the first people I met was Dr. Shamlian. Right now, my official title is clinical administrator, and so I oversee a lot of things, but my most important thing is making sure that the needs of our patients are met, and sometimes we get it right, and we're working to make sure we always get it right. And the biggest thing is making sure that family needs are met and that families feel heard,
Yeah.
right? And then what are the things that we need to do better? And I think that's really important because that's important to me, right? So those are the things that I still have with my, Brittany and I go way back. Our babies started in kindergarten together. That's how we met. And the things that we struggle with now are different, but they're still struggles. So that piece is never going to go away. They're just different. Looks different than they did at 5, but they're still there. So the only difference is now is that I have a community that can support me in that, right? I have colleagues like Dr. Quo and Dr. Shamley, and then I have a social circle like Brittany and other friends who I've been able to build that I didn't have when my son was younger. And I think that's so important for parents too, and it's something that when families are struggling that I talk to, like, you know, what does your circle look like? What do you have? Who do you have that can help you? Because you have times that are really tough. And it's really hard, whether it's a systems navigation or whether it's just the day-to-day stuff that just makes you just think, I can't keep doing this, like it's too hard. So those are the things that all of these things that Dr. Shamlin has talked about and that Dr. Quo is going to talk about, all those things that we're trying to do, but then trying to make sure that at the center is families and how are all these things working together to make that better for you and your child or your children, depending if you have 1 or 2 or several children that are seen in our clinic. And to make it so that access to services is easier, but also that once you have the access, that those interventions that we're putting in place, like the behavior piece that Ken talked about and all of those things that are in place are actually making a positive impact on your daily life and on your child's life. And that when you look at like quality of life, like I always talk about that, right? In these meetings that we have with our kids, like quality of life measures and all those things. Like, what do we always want for our kids? I want my kid to be safe. I want him to be happy. I want him to have employment that is meaningful. Like, I want to make sure that all of these things are in place. And it doesn't seem like big things, but they are. Like, that's what we want for him. And so that's what we want as a clinic. We want to make sure that the things that we are doing help to get those goals met for you. And so I think when we talk with parents and we talk with community groups, it's how do we help you to do those things, and what are the things that we need to do better, and what are the supports that families are looking for right now that they don't have, and are those things that we can help backfill, and what we don't have. You know, I think about when I started in clinic and I look at how we've expanded the behavior programs and the feeding programs and like toileting programs, things that we had been asking for so long, and we just didn't have the capacity. And I think of where we are now, and that's an improvement. You know, I think of the infant toddler program that Dr. Coe is going to talk about. And it used to be just very small, what we were able to do. And now the expansion of that and what we're doing with research and just all of these things being able to grow and expand and what that means for our community. But also recognizing, and Brittany, you kind of touched on this too, is, you know, the capacity. Like, how do we work on that? You know, the things that, you know, when we have kids that are waiting for early intervention services, you know, and they're coming to us, and either they've just started early intervention, or maybe they have PT and OT, but there's no SIA available yet. Or it's maybe 1 hour and they're eligible for 5. You know, things like those things are out of our control, but then, you know, it impacts the child's ability if they can't do all those things, you know. And obviously schools are oftentimes, families come to appointments and, you know, they need support with schools and behaviors and IEP goals and all of those things, and there's just a lot to juggle. And there's a lot of asks that come our way, and then, you know, how do we partner with our families to make sure that we're giving suggestions and supports that help them. So that's it. Dr. Quo.
Hi, everybody. I guess it's my turn. My name is Dennis Quo. I am a pediatrician, and I have been in Rochester for just over 2 years. So I figured I'd give you a little bit about my background and journey, why I'm here, and to talk about our division and what we do. I am the division chief of the Division of Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics. I'm originally from the New York City area, and 24 years ago, I just came out of pediatrics residency and was working at a small private practice in the New York City area. And because of what I saw as a pediatrician, and because I practice, I had some really amazing senior partners who, the neonatologists and the groups in the area, you know, folks in the area just referred a lot of their kids with special needs and disabilities to that practice. And after 5 years there, I took a jump out of there to try to study that field much better, get a lot more of maternal child health training and research training that I did not get as a clinician, to really understand the system, try to understand the field. And it led to an academic career where I've really studied systems and families and communities, and had the opportunity to be involved with a number of national initiatives, which has really tried to define the field of rooting our systems and communities and families. So that's like a whole nother side of the academic side of what I do. It also led me to 2 other states before I came back to New York State, and I can tell you I'm thrilled to be back in New York State, and I'm thrilled to be in Rochester. I was in Buffalo for several years before I came here. We have 22 faculty and 76 staff within our division, and we offer, in addition to our clinical services, we offer the Strong Center for Developmental Disabilities, the LEN Interdisciplinary Leadership Program for Neurodevelopmental Disabilities. We have several large research programs. Our goal is to be able to bring disability awareness service training throughout everywhere. You know, our systems, our hospitals, our communities, and developmental behavioral pediatrics care is inherently rooted in families and communities. Clinically, most of my time is spent in the infant toddler clinic and general comprehensive follow-up care for IDD. And, you know, in addition to the behavior programs and the feeding programs, and the infant toddler program is the high-risk neonatal follow-up clinic. And from the work I would like to push that. I'm in the process of pushing that clinic to do not just the screening and more dedicated evaluations, but also to be able to push wellness, health, development, just things that we have to be doing to be able to push everything forward. You know, like we can't be reactive in what we do. We have to be inclusive, we have to be proactive, we have to set pathways, and we have to do it together. And we got a lot of work to do. I'm here because this is an amazing community. I mean, the folks that have done work here, and you know, there's names like Susan Hyman, Steve Sulka, Susan Hetherington, the folks that frankly are legends and giants in the field that I knew before I even came to Rochester. I mean, they came out of here, and it's because of the work and the legacy we do. We still have a lot of work to do, you know, and I know that everyone in this room has experiences through the system that have been up and down, and I feel very firmly that systems and the components and the processes and values are what generates behavior. And so we think through who we have working together at leadership tables, how we set agendas, how we move forward together. You know, we know our system is fragmented. We know that there are long wait lists. We know that there are issues related to payments and availability and access. I mean, you know, like the things I study access. I mean, that's actually one of the things I do is actually study the issue of access. And I want us to think of our journeys as an ongoing process that should not be tied to a diagnosis or wait lists or such. I mean, all of our kids are kids, all of our families are families, and we have to look at the values of, we value humanism in life as the way that we need to be valuing everybody in every community. And it's not, that's actually, yeah, that's the way we need to be leading, you know, our institution, our group together, and we know that it's not as universal as it needs to be, and this is what we need to be leading going forward. So that's what I'll say. Thank you.
So I'm just going to ask, does anybody have any questions starting out?
Hi, my grandson, and this is my son here, is on one of those wait lists. And in the meantime, he is going to be 3 next month. He does have services. He's got OT, he's got speech. We don't know what else to do. Is there anything else we can do? We're not sure when he's going to have an evaluation. He's been given a soft no for autism, but I don't know. He has autism tendencies. I used to work with kids with autism. He's got very good eye contact. I guess that's what they keep saying. He's got very good eye contact, but does that mean he doesn't have autism? I don't know. So we're just wondering what to do in the meantime.
Should I take that?
Yeah,
You want to take that?
might be up yours, yeah. Although I will just say that
Yeah.
eye contact does not mean much for me as a diagnostician. I think I have tons
Right.
of examples of kids with autism with great eye
Right.
contact.
Right.
So, but
Yeah.
it's one of many things, for sure.
Right. So,
Yeah, I will give somewhat general answers because to be able to give specific answers would be, have a much more clinical, you know, individual conversation. We talk about the terms of developmental scaffolding, which is that we have to look at families and systems and the education system, and it all has to be lining up. In terms of developmental promotion, as a general rule, I find that everybody's doing an amazing job at supporting their kids, and we have to be confident in knowing that we are doing a great job, because what kids need are routines, kids need structure, kids need expectations, kids need responsiveness, and they need attachment and love, and they need all of those going forward. I mean, the most important thing is to make sure we take care of ourselves and our families. And number 2 is to make sure that we connect with other families and other resources, because that's where you're going to learn the vast majority of what we do on day-to-day and advocacy going forward. In terms of some of the things I've heard so far, you know, of course, the clinical side of me wants to ask about, and I'm not going to go into this in a public forum, but this is kind of where my head goes. You know, risk factors that can be addressed as Ken said, eye contact is one of the things we looked at, but we also look at things like pretend play, we look at quality of play, we look at behaviors, communications, interaction. You definitely want to teach, make sure that your child is able to be supported with getting their attention and to be able to communicate properly, because when a lot of times when we hear about behaviors, I mean, all behavior is communication, and we have to address the communication and and support the child's needs and capabilities in those areas. And it gets down to things like how does your child tell you what they need and want, and are you giving the child the opportunity to do so? And do we have to look at things like getting in front of your child? Do we have to look at things like the way you address your child? Because if your child is frustrated, they will show you that they're frustrated. The general answer is make sure that families are taking care of themselves, make sure that we connect with other folks and resources. Educational advocacy is definitely a big part of what we do. In addition to family advocacy, there's the educational advocacy like Starbridge and parent training information centers. The families can link to other support areas that should be supporting everything from stability to attachment to routines to just knowing that you're not alone in this.
And do you have the supports? You said you have early intervention right now, or they're school age at this point, so you're getting preschool services?
Yeah, so within early intervention is in preschool
Okay.
right now.
Yeah.
Obviously with the autism stuff, he does have his speech delay.
Okay.
Which is part of that communication
Yeah.
side.
Okay.
So for mine, it's really been saturation. What can we do to kind of get him to
Yeah.
pick it up?
Yeah.
More resources on the speech side, because I think a lot of the frustration you're saying from the
Right.
behavior is stemming from not being able
Right.
to communicate with us.
Right.
And that's, for us, other than having early intervention, he's on the wait list for STARS,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we're not aware of anything else that's out there
Right,
to help them out with the speech, which I think is probably a big root cause of everything.
right.
One resource that Ken had mentioned, the Help Is in Your Hands program. There is actually a website, helpisinyourhands.org. I think it's org.
I think it's org.
Yeah, helpisinyourhands.org, which actually gives you a lot of that curriculum, and there is a opportunity to register for free and view the videos, and it may be worth the time to just look through it, because what it does is it gives you the opportunity to think through how do we teach and lead our kids with attention, communication, and flexibility, which is what we need. What I find with a lot of our kids with who are at risk for developmental delay is, it's every child has their own pathway, and some kids we want to be much more proactive than others. It's saying, this is how we need to structure that. That's one recommendation I would have is, it's free, it's available, it's publicly available. Feel free to take a look at it. Helpisinyourhands.org.
Yeah, and I think that speech and language component is kind of interesting too, right? Because it's speech and language. So is it that he literally has difficulty producing speech, and there's something else, whether it be delay or otherwise, or pronunciation, articulation, things like this, or is it, is really kind of like the communication piece? In other words, how much is he understanding what's being said to him, and how much is he being able to show that kind of like understanding and then trying to express, right? So there's two different components from a speech language issue. But I do think the Help Is in Your Hands component is nice because it doesn't rely necessarily that your child has to have any language to benefit from this. It really was developed with our colleagues out at UCLA, and they helped translate some materials from like an Early Start Denver model to kind of like create this thing for really parents to really access on their own if they had it, but also there's a coach component, which is kind of how we see our psychologists who do participate as therapists in the program. It's really just kind of helping parents set up like learning opportunities. Unfortunately, what it's not going to do is do like additional speech like services like for the family, which at this age, right, what are they going to probably do? Like maybe 30 minutes a week, right? Like, having had 2 kids in early intervention myself, it's like not always a lot, and it's like it's all on you. at the end of the day, and it feels like, they're just giving you tools to do when they're not around. And so I would view this resource as the same, and I think it builds on just really fundamental kind of like, how do you connect with your kids' social communication kind of skills, and it's a lot of play, and learning to like, how do we get them to recognize they did something good right in that moment, that we want more of that, and so it kind of seems to kind of help target some key learning moments like that, while we're waiting to see if there's something else that helps us define like what's the nature of what's going on. And also, even if it was, I would still tell you to do the same thing. I would say, like, this might be a good program for you if you have the time and, and availability to do it. So you wouldn't be losing anything. It would potentially just be one thing that you could feel like you'd have like some guidance on that you might be able to use and take what you can from it and benefit your child. So I like that suggestion. I didn't think about that at first, but.
I will say a lot of times if I see a child for the first time at 3 and 4, the vast majority of families have already just figured out how to move things forward even without a firm diagnosis one way or the other. I mean, families are amazing. Parents and families, they read their child. I mean, that's the thing. You should read your child, know your child's style, know your child's capabilities, know your child's strengths, and build on them. And there's a very, very, very good chance that you're actually doing everything you need to be doing already. And we just move forward. But if you want to be able to give you a shout out that when you're coming to places like here and you're connecting with other families, the key here is to know what your child can do and build on what your child is able to do, rather than, we see behavior and tantrums and such when the expectations of what the child can do, what we may be expecting in the scaffolding may not be quite matched properly. But if you read your child and you support your child and you know what your child's strengths are, move forward, that's actually what you need to be doing right now.
And I know the wait list, if I could, I would have them seen tomorrow. I know, I look at that and we all feel that.
We know more of what you can do.
Yes.
Take it from not the clinical perspective. My advice is to connect with other families. Like we have those play dates because that's a place where families can meet other families sharing some of the same challenges, and they can brainstorm together, they can commiserate together, they can celebrate some of the small successes. So I guess from a parent's perspective, I think one of the best things you can do for your family is make sure you're not walking that journey alone, and just meet other families that are in similar circumstances, having some of the same challenges.
Is there a calendar online that they would know when the meetups are?
Yeah.
Kim's like, hold on, I got it.
I know.
Hold on.
And get your child involved in Challenger Sports, because that's another avenue of like really great venting sessions and problem solving. And every time I go to one of these panels, I'm learning something new. I think I'm talking loud enough. And every time I go to Challenger, I learn something new. Like Mandy and she taught me about a different assistive tech, guru thing for my daughter at a baseball game. And I was like, what? I didn't know anything about that. I was at a play date at Gigi's last week, and I'm struggling to find an appropriate dance class for my daughter. And Haley at Gigi's was like, do you know that I'm a dance teacher? I'm like, no. And she's going this Saturday. So there are connections, there are parents helping parents. We chose that name for a reason. We are literally parents helping each other out. We have volunteer providers coming to the play dates, OTs, PTs, speech therapists. So if you're waiting for a service and you have a question, you walk right up to them and ask them while you're waiting for services.
Awesome.
Challenger Sports, the parents there, no offense to anyone on the panel, but the parents there know a lot more than doctors do on a lot of these topics that we struggle with, because it's lived experience.
Lived experience, there's something to be said about that,
Absolutely.
No
Absolutely.
offense taken whatsoever.
Yeah.
This is actually in the academic literature.
Yeah.
For
Lived
the
experience,
families.
sure.
Go with, it's early referral parent-family referrals, group support, that is absolutely the foundation. That is,
We have-
that's
and, yeah.
it, yeah.
We have an autism, the Scribble family makes possible. We have an autism conference coming up, and it's free, it's virtual. And the topic is lived experience.
Yeah.
And it's very much like the family experience is embedded through these sessions. And I'm on a couple of those panels, so sign up. And it is talking about that, what you're referencing, Kim.
Yeah.
Is, and one of them's on, that piece when your child turns 18 and what are the options available, supported decision-making, guardianship, whatever it might be. And parents who have chosen those various options are represented on the panel. So I would advise you to look into that. I will send you that link too, so you can put it on your website if you already haven't, Britt.
Yes, please.
So
We haven't, yeah.
it's a free, and the sessions will be recorded, but it would be nice to have you register and, join whatever those sessions might be of interest to you.
I did want, are you saying something?
No, go
Oh,
ahead, Kim.
Sorry. I just also wanted to say, as a validation, yes, waiting for an evaluation, waiting for a diagnosis, there's nothing like that. There's nothing that you can say that, like, to make that better. Getting a diagnosis often helps you get more services too. So there's anxiety there. Like, we want a diagnosis so that we can get OPWDD and self-direction and da-da-da-da. But in the meantime, there are so many supports and resources. You just have to find your village. And if you've come here, you already found it. And I just want to say one more thing about Dr. Quo. Just giving a quick shout out to Dr. Quo and his colleagues and staff. They truly do care about families. Like, the fact that they're here and the fact that recently Dr. Quo met with Parents Helping Parents just to find out, like, what more can we do? What are parents saying? Like, these are really, really great resources that we have in Rochester. They're unbelievable. So you talk about Dr. Selkes and Hyman being a legend. We think you're a legend, Dr. Quo. Thank you. And thank you for validating that. I'm sorry.
Give me that back.
No, but like, validating that parents are doing a great job already. We are. We're freaking awesome. We are so, so good at being parents. So thank you for saying that.
You sure?
I'm done.
Okay.
I saw a hand over there. I saw a hand there.
Oh, yeah.
Hi. First of all, I just want to say that if I have a lot of, if you need any, like, if you have an email address later, I can give you a lot of information. We spent, our son's 7 now. He started out by being kicked out of daycare at 4, suspended at his elementary school and kindergarten. But finding that help, I even get like emotional about it even now, and this was years ago, but Googling, like, just anybody help me, like, we don't share a lot on Facebook, but I got to the point where I went on Facebook and I was like, does anybody know of any services where I can get, and I like pushed and pushed and pushed. I'd call for cancellations. It was very stressful. But I called over a handful of places, talked to people that didn't accept insurance, how much it could cost if I did this. But like, I could send you a bunch of places I've called before. If you want that, I'm more than happy to do that. But on another note, so our son is going to be 7 in a couple weeks. He was diagnosed with, first he was diagnosed with anxiety. Then they said now it's ADHD. We also we don't know, we were diagnosed with ODD by an institute we went to. And then because of his behavior, he was kicked out of kindergarten. And we had to go to OWL in Webster. I don't know if okay. So our son was there for kindergarten first and now is in 2nd and started back, knock on wood, back at his elementary school. But at OWL, they said, no, he doesn't have ODD. That's not it. So we've been told a lot of, no, definitely not, yes, this. So we're kind of like, okay, I guess it's ADHD he has. I don't know. That's what we're doing. But we see a lot of behaviors at home that we're still trying to learn more about ADHD. The CSE meetings that were you know, like just
They're hard.
awful. The tears and the weeks and the crying and the calling superintendents and just trying to get help is honestly the worst thing I've ever had to go through. But we don't know if we need to continue more on trying to figure out, is it ODD? Is it something else? Is it, you know, we also, we had this conversation last night of, we are playing this as, oh, it's just an ADHD. It's not really like a thing, you know, it's just ADHD. And now as we try to play with our neighbors and do things, it's frustrating for him, I think. It's frustrating for us, and sad. And I just don't know if we need to figure out if we need to do more, if we need to try and figure out if this is ODD. I mean, it was a similar place such as yours, so we were like, okay, it's ODD. She was like, sure, ODD. And then all these, you know, teachers and whatnot said, no, definitely not. And then trying to get you know, my poor son has seen more therapists, I think, than everybody in this room in his little life. And they've said, no, definitely not ODD. And you're like, well, we just got a medical diagnosis. It was, you know, so we're just like, we don't know what to do with that.
You could tag team this one if you want.
You go first.
Okay. Yeah, that's a tough one. I mean, you know, statistically, like 50% of kids with ADHD end up with a diagnosis of ODD, but usually it's because of, obviously, their neurodiverse kind of like, you know, background, right? So my general approach clinically is that, like, you can always tag on ODD because it's just a descriptor, right? Like, we're just taking what you tell us. It fits a number of different descriptors, you know, and they meet criteria out of like a diagnostic manual. I tend to try to avoid it personally as a diagnostician, just because it really kind of takes away from what I think is really just a hard go, right? The ADHD diagnosis, you know, it's hard to live with. You know, I've seen it in kids very young, obviously, all the way up before you can even diagnose, although we're pretty sure. You know, and when they're into adulthood, and sometimes they're on my staff, you know, and that's totally fine because like they're brilliant in so many ways. I guess like my thoughts are that like it probably is not necessarily helpful, you know, because ultimately what it does for most kids, especially in schools, is it brands them as like, yeah, you're just a defiant kid, and not recognizing that there's an actual neurodevelopmental background to like why they're getting in trouble, right? Like, I'm impulsive. I don't think I can rewire my brain, you know, that well. And they might do a number of other things that are annoying, you know. I'm also convinced, you know, that much like anybody, like kids do well if they can do well. And if they're not doing well, there's something going on. And it may not be always fully in their control. So, nor would we expect, you know, them at age 7, 8 to be in control completely, right? Like, so there's some just general developmental grace there. My thoughts are that, like, I don't know if, you know, I can't answer the question whether or not you need to continue to go down, like, another diagnostic road. I can just kind of share with you my experience that generally, like, aside from, like, the fact that, like, I'm not a real big fan of ODD as a diagnosis, especially when it's in the context of ADHD, I think also that it's hard to find people that really know ADHD, right? Like this is like why, you know, even like when you have kids come in for diagnostics, you know, the big trifecta is like, is it anxiety, is it ADHD, or is it autism? Yes? And so those were kind of like, especially for my 8-year-olds plus, like that becomes like the biggest kind of like, what do we want to talk about this as, you know, generally. And yeah, I think it is tricky, to be honest. It can be very tricky, depending on how things look. But if you know ADHD, sometimes you're like, you know, maybe it's not just either or, it's both and. But, you know, they also can kind of help really kind of explain, like, as I'm sure you guys are well-versed in executive functions at this point, you know, it can look a lot different than the stereotypes. So I think I'm not necessarily... If you feel like you know the diagnosis of ADHD is correct, good. If the school's not really telling you ODD, you know, maybe, you know, for ODD, you can have it present in one environment, not the other. It doesn't have to be both across. But I'm just wondering whether or not, like, is there really any value, to kind of continue down that road? Probably not, but I would say, like, it's hard to find what I would call like a good specialist in particular in that area. And I'm not sure if I'm answering any of your questions or giving you some my own.
Okay.
We were, we kind of just, it was autism, anxiety, ADHD, ODD,
Yeah.
now we're back to ADHD, and it's upsetting to hear about this. You guys have a toileting thing. We potty trained him for 6 years, so I wish we knew about
It's fairly new, if that helps you. It's fairly new.
Yeah.
Oh,
Like a year old. It's just a year old.
So-
Yeah.
but, yes, so we're just trying to
Yeah.
manage that, and we've got 2 other siblings, so
The relationships are hard.
trying to navigate,
Yeah.
allowing their younger, so trying to navigate allowing them to do something. Why can he do this? I can't, we don't,
Yeah.
There you go. If I can add just 2 other points to what Ken was saying. Putting my developmental pediatrician hat on, my scope is to go back and look at the history and trajectory going all the way back to prenatal. And I find that a lot of times it's, the journey is being able to put this arc together. So a very specific example I see actually quite a bit is a child may have been born at 34, 35 weeks, which completely flies under the radar for preemie developmental follow-up, but there's actually a lot of differences in the mid to late preemies that just get completely fly under the radar, and then they show up in, mental health services at 6, 7, 8, 9, whereas you can actually see a trajectory of how their feeding was really challenging going on back to the minute that they came home. And there are brain-based differences in a lot of our kids that we have to do. As a system, we need to be putting all that together because that does impact how we really move forward and look at things. The other thing I wanted to mention is, I think a lot and very well recognize both the power and the drawbacks of diagnoses. And I certainly see a lot of kids where they come in with about 7 or 10 different diagnoses, and sometimes I'm giving the 11th and trying to jettison the other 10. But the point that I do want to put forth is that the guidelines for managing this from the developmental pediatric side does not depend on the diagnosis. It depends on shared decision making, looking at the behavior, education, and community plans, and targeting specific functional needs and symptoms. And it doesn't matter what the diagnosis is. And the reason is that sometimes diagnoses change, sometimes they evolve, sometimes they help, sometimes they don't, and sometimes they can lead to some kind of a walling off of, okay, well, your kid has this, therefore we're just going to go down that road. And Ken mentioned, the impact of having an ODD diagnosis. My recommendation is that in a collaborative shared decision-making model, you want to work with a health professional or a team of health professionals that you're comfortable with, and that's what I would encourage. But also know particularly the strengths and of what a parent brings to that relationship, because the parent knows what's going on at home, the parent knows what's going on at school, the parent knows what's going on with all of the processes and the trajectory, and it is shared decision making. So there is literally no specific guidelines saying if you have a diagnosis you have to do this. Our guidelines actually say partner and do shared decision making and target symptoms. And if we're talking about medication, for example, it's try this, reevaluate, but you have to have the connections, the relationships in there, because if you don't, you're just not going to get to where you need to go.
I just wanted to ask, because the school districts often will say you need a diagnosis to get services, but then you're saying the diagnosis doesn't matter. But like when my son went to school, he was starting out in kindergarten, he didn't have a diagnosis. And so they gave him a 504 plan.
Yeah.
And so they didn't have an IEP. But then he goes to you guys, and he gets a diagnosis of autism, and then they're like, okay, we'll give you services now.
Yeah.
So it's, we hear that often going back and forth. The doctors say diagnosis doesn't matter, but then the school district says the diagnosis does matter. So I don't know what your feeling on that
It's
is.
crazy to me
It is
because the
yeah.
testing should determine what the child needs, right?
Yeah.
So if they're getting testing and the testing shows you're in need of speech services or OT, then that should determine it regardless of whether or not you have it.
Yeah.
I agree, 100%. And
and
we
I-
would jockey between this with my son too, and I'm
Yeah.
like, the medical and the educational model, instead of them matching up and playing nice, they do not. But
Yeah,
it should be
yeah.
needs-based and not diagnosis determinant.
Yeah, and I completely 100% agree. And it's, the medical model is actually relatively agnostic of diagnoses, but I understand the education model isn't. And that's, a lot of times we do give, like, this is a unifying diagnosis.
We know a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what, it's funny because I'm listening to everybody. I'm listening to the shared decision-making. I'm listening to the needing the diagnosis. I'm listening to getting kicked out of kindergarten and being in preschool and waiting for an integrated classroom. And one of the big supports that was helpful to me with my children was and I don't, you need to remind me of even the name, but the fact that there were providers from developmental and behavioral peds in the schools that consulted
Community
with.
consult program.
Yeah, that consulted. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that. And is that something that you would do? I mean, I know you have a contract particularly with my district, and I know some other districts, but can we expand that so that that program is in other schools? Do you do anything that's kind of a one-time community education or a webinar with a preschool or with providers if the district or the school does not have a contract with you? Can you just talk a little bit about that? Because that was just such a huge support, and it sounds like from everybody here, that's kind of a necessary disconnect, or that's a necessary connection that feels disconnected right now between, within that shared decision-making.
So Brittany and I were in the same school district. That's how we met 17 years ago or so. And their community consult program, our colleagues are in that. So it is psychologists and BCBAs that go into schools. It's contracts the schools have, and they provide direct support into classrooms that have children with autism and intellectual disabilities. And they do trainings with the teachers and with the students and come up with behavior plans, but also do educational trainings with the teachers around this is what autism looks like, this is how you would interact with the students, decrease behaviors, and also just make the classroom function better, right? So my child, like for example, had a lot of school refusal when he was 5 and 6 and 7 and 8. So trying to get him to school was a nightmare. And your daughter presented differently, we'll just say. And so they would work with us as families, but also with the teachers. So the district has to have a contract. So the community consult program, in just the years I've been there, has expanded exponentially, right? But the district has to contract with us to go in. Parents can request it, but the district has to do that. I don't even know what our contract looks like now. It just continues to grow and to grow. But we always, like when parents call, we recommend that and say, hey, reach out to your district for this community consult program. And they do, and the district can choose or not to do that.
Or not.
Or not,
Yeah.
which sometimes they do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's a service that they have to buy into.
We do offer one-time consults if the district is willing to do a one-time consult.
I have all this information. I'm going to leave it with you. And
And-
Jenny, I'm going to leave it with you too.
And then through the Rochester Regional
Rochester Regional Center.
Center,
Yeah.
Autism Spectrum Disorders Center, right?
Yep.
Or CASD,
Yeah. Yep.
Center for Autism Spectrum Disorders. I mean, we do a lot of in-services, certainly for schools. A lot of our CSD kind of requests, to be honest, but we do request, and we just kind of have one of our faculty usually go and give a, whatever they're interested on, whatever their questions they have in general, we're happy to always fulfill those requests, but,
Yep.
yeah.
But I will tell you this, unfortunately, we get calls into our office like that. We get calls into our office often, and they'll say, oh my gosh, please help me, my son got kicked out of school.
Yeah.
And so we have a social work team that, will talk with the family and come up with a plan and, who should you be calling at the school? How can we work that? Like, they ask the question, like, do they have an IEP? Do they have a behavior plan? Who are the contacts that you're working with in school? Do you have the community consultation program? Who are you working with?
I think one of the hardest questions I remember getting from a family when we came to a kind of like an agreement after an evaluation that, we felt really strongly that all of the symptoms that he had were really kind of consistent with like an ADHD profile. They're like, all right, so where's the help for that? Like, and I was like, because like we often hear a lot of grassroots kind of efforts and things like that for the community for like maybe autism spectrum disorder, but prior to autism hitting the scene after the 90s, really kind of like, ADHD was like a hot topic, right? Like that was your ticket. And then we had like a ton of, resources and things that grew out of that. Research was exponential at that point. And unfortunately, there's not like a cohesive kind of group around it. ADHD just kind of gets branded as like you got crazy, out of control bad kid, and for whatever reason, it just didn't kind of collectively kind of homogenize into like an activist kind of support group. And so a lot of times I still have to kind of point people towards like online kind of groups, through like Attitude Magazine and, a couple other different resources I know of, but that's hard too. There's not like we have very accepting groups here of like all, I'm sure, neurodiversity, but at the same time, like it hits a little bit different, for sure. Yeah.
And ADHD is complex. Like, I tell parents that, like, this isn't just your child that doesn't want to pay attention. It's a very complex, neurodiverse diagnosis. And like Ken said, like, if he could, he would. He can't.
Was there anything else that like we could help speak to or anything else?
No,
Okay.
that's
All right.
just, trying to, figuring it out, really like everything.
In full disclosure, I'm from Rochester Accessible Adventures. But I'm wondering if you have resources to connect not only the individual, but families to inclusive recreation opportunities?
We do.
So we do. We actually.
Do we have some? Dr. Verway is one of our pediatricians. Who else is actually kind of part of that effort?
Have you talked with Dr. Verway? I feel like she put this together. It's recreation and leisure for all. And this is one of her big focuses, and I actually think you're listed.
I've been in touch with her a little bit.
Oh, okay.
She's not part of it, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've had some good conversations
Yeah.
through YMCA and some other groups,
Yeah.
many groups, really.
it's-
And so there is some direct
And
efforts and interest, for
with
sure.
Lorna, have you been in touch with Lorna? Because she works with our physical disabilities clinic. And so we talk a lot about that as well, but let's connect.
Yeah, this is all
So-
part of our Strong Center for Developmental Disabilities, is
Yeah.
part of our division. It's an
Yeah.
essential part of our work.
Absolutely.
So we are at 12 o'clock. I can take a couple more questions, but we do have to wrap up. I see you have a question.
Thanks, I appreciate it. I know we're getting close to time. I wanted to know if there is a consensus in the medical community regarding sleep. We're in the Webster district, and with the brain development issues and switching times, is that track with kids with development disabilities or in learning disabilities or not? Basis for the question is, as our son grows and goes into middle school and high school, is it going to benefit him? Is it going to have him? Is he going to regress because of this?
You mean switching of the time?
Yeah, as a whole, right? I mean, middle and high school kids now go to school later in Webster, as the brain development issue and all that research comes to light.
I mean, from the medical community it's solid. The adolescents do better with later start times. There's no question within the medical community about that.
Development disabilities versus genetic.
Yeah, the part about whether it impacts developmental disabilities differently, I don't think there's consensus on that. I can tell you that as far as the medical community, there's a very, very good consensus that's where, as a system, we need to be headed to.
I think Yeah, I'm not sure if the research breaks it down like that far.
Yeah.
I will say, like, one of my colleagues out in Colorado, I think authored one of the main papers for kind of like this issue of arguing for like we should be pushing these start times later, which our sleep center has actually been, Dr. Tomaselli and Dr. Cromwell have been certainly a big part of. They were successful, I guess, in getting Fairport to also agree to
Yes.
finally push theirs. There's no reason to think that even for kids with developmental disabilities that for doing something that in general seems to kind of like be better for just optimal functioning and mental health functioning, that it wouldn't benefit like all, because I think a lot of the biology, although there are differences for sure, certainly would, be beneficial to quite a few folks who are differently abled for sure. Yeah, so I would expect it to be helpful, but it's just like so many of those other issues where it's like, how do we know? In some ways we know because of like some data that pops up, and there's other things where it's just like, well, if I ate Cheerios every day, I'd have a better heart at age 30 or something, right? Like, I don't know. And so probably, but it seems to reflect an actual true physiological change that happens in adolescence, early adulthood. And respecting that seems to kind of make a lot more sense. I think it would be helpful. Yeah.
All right, well, we're going to wrap up. I want to thank everybody for coming today. I thank our panel of experts who are amazing, give a lot of information. I want to remind everybody that on November 6th, that's our next Diverse Abilities Dialogue, and it's going to be Building Your Village. And just to kind of pairs well with this conversation about, community engagement and finding people in the community, families, parents who can help support you. So that's a great presentation. I hope you, a panel that I hope you'll attend. I also just got an email this morning that Rhonda Coit is having a disability fair. They have about 20 different organizations that are coming. It's this Saturday from 10 to noon. So if you're looking for extra supports, that might be a fabulous place to go on Saturday. And we do have a fair here as well at the Webster Library. I didn't know if everybody knew that, on April 19th in 2025. That's our next one, so it's a little ways away. But we'll have over 50 organizations here with their information and supports. And Challenger Miracle Field and Parents Helping Parents always come to our event as well. Did I mention their play date that's on October 12th? There's information over there, as well as all of our flyers from all of the organizations that have participated in previous special needs parent resource fair here at the Webster Library. So I encourage you to check out some of the handouts over here. And thank you everybody for attending today, and we hope to see you at our next presentation.